The hidden audit mistake that cost the CEO 8 million and how to never make it. A single missing audit signature destroyed an 8 million deal in my office. The buyer walked away because they couldn't trust the financial statements. I'm David White, and in the next 6 minutes, I'll expose the 5 audit and assurance blind spots that can kill your business, including the one mistake that 90% of growing companies make that turn investors into ghosts. Stay until the end because I'll reveal the exact red flags that tell you your current audit process is about to blow up in your face. After 40 years in business, from selling Xerox door to door to innovating for Disney and Sony, I've learned something Warren Buffett discovered the hard way. Accounting is the language of business, but bad accounting is the language of bankruptcy. Most entrepreneurs think audits are just expensive paperwork. The smart money knows audits are credibility weapons that separate real businesses from pretenders. Here's the brutal truth. Your financial statements are either building trust or destroying it. There's no middle ground. Every investor, every bank, every potential buyer looks at your audit trail like a detective examining evidence. One weakness, one inconsistency, one questionable entry, and suddenly you're explaining instead of selling. Let me tell you about a tech entrepreneur who learned this lesson the expensive way. A brilliant software company was built from 0 to 2.4 million in 3 years. When private equity came knocking with an 8 million offer, the owner felt like a lottery winner. And then came the due diligence. Internal bookkeeping, which was saved money, fell apart under scrutiny. The PE firm found inconsistencies, missing documentation, and controls weaker than tissue paper. The deal died in 48 hours, not because the business was bad, but because they couldn't prove it was good. As the PE partner told me later, we don't buy businesses, we buy certainty. And what we saw was chaos. The 2.4 million company is still running 3 years later, while competitors with proper audit trails get acquired for 10 times multiples. This brings me to the 5 audit and assurance services that separate amateur hour from acquisition-ready businesses. Think of these as your credibility insurance policy: invisible when working, catastrophic when missing. First, external audit services actually matter. Most people think external audits are regulatory box ticking. Wrong. External audits are credibility amplifiers. When KPMG signs off on your statements, you're not just compliant, you're investable. I learned this during my early days after selling Xerox machines. I had a brilliant business idea but couldn't get serious investment. You know why? My financial statements looked like they were prepared by a creative writing student. One proper external audit later, and I went from interesting conversation to serious investment opportunity. Your external audit becomes your business's character reference. It tells the world this company is professional enough to submit to independent scrutiny and strong enough to pass it. Key elements include audit readiness that turns compliance into competitive advantage, stakeholder communication that builds investor confidence, control testing that proves your systems actually work, and management responses that show you take feedback seriously. Second, internal audit functions prevent disasters. Internal audits are like having a personal trainer for your business processes. Painful in the moment, life-saving in the long run. As Peter Drucker said, what gets measured gets managed. What gets audited gets trusted. Here's what most entrepreneurs miss. Internal audits don't just catch problems, they prevent them. They're your early warning system for everything from fraud to inefficiency to compliance failures. I once worked with a manufacturing company that discovered through internal audit that their inventory system was overcounting stock by 23%. And without that audit, they'd have made production decisions based on phantom inventory, leading to supply chain disasters and angry customers. Third, financial statement assurance builds trust. Your financial statements are either weapons of persuasion or weapons of mass destruction. Professional assurance turns numbers into narratives that investors actually believe. Think about it. Anyone can type numbers into Excel, but when a qualified professional stakes their reputation on those numbers through compilation, review, or assurance services, you've just transformed data into credibility. I remember working with a client whose financial statements looked impressive until you dug deeper. Revenue was inflated, expenses understated, and cash flow was, let's just say, creative. One proper assurance engagement later, and the real numbers were lower, but believable. They got funded because investors trusted the story the numbers told. Fourth, compliance, audit, and regulatory assurance. Here's what most entrepreneurs' eyes glaze over. Compliance is boring, they say. You know what else is boring? Explaining to your accountant why your business bank account has been frozen by regulators. Compliance audits are like having diplomatic immunity in the business world. They prove you play by the rules before anyone questions whether you do. As Benjamin Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. In business, an ounce of compliance audit is worth a ton of regulatory investigation. I once saw a brilliant fintech startup get shut down, not because their product was bad, but because their compliance documentation couldn't pass basic regulatory scrutiny. 2 years of development gone because they treated compliance like homework instead of homework for staying in business. Fifth, risk assessment and management assurance. Risk assessment isn't about eliminating risk. That's impossible. It's about managing risk before risk manages you. Professional risk assurance turns unknown threats into manageable business strategies. The smartest entrepreneurs I know don't just identify risks, they systematically prove they can handle them. That proof becomes a competitive advantage when investors are choosing between you and competitors who can't demonstrate risk maturity. Enterprise risk management covers everything from strategic threats to operational hiccups to the existential, what if our biggest client disappears tomorrow scenarios. Let me share something personal that changed how I think about audits forever. Early in my career, after the Xerox days, I was consulting for a company that seemed bulletproof, great leadership, strong revenue, happy customers. And then our annual audit revealed something shocking. Their main revenue stream violated industry regulations they didn't even know existed. The audit didn't just find a problem, it found a business-ending problem. But because they discovered it through proper audit processes instead of regulatory investigation, they had time to fix it. Without that audit, they'd have been shut down by regulators 6 months later. That's when I realized audits aren't expenses, they're insurance policies. They cost money up front, but save your business when everything goes wrong. Here are the red flags that tell you your audit process is about to explode. You avoid audits because they're too expensive. Your auditor never asks hard questions. You can't explain your financial controls to a stranger. Your audit findings never lead to improvements. You treat compliance as something to minimize instead of maximize. Now, if any of these sound familiar, you're not getting audited. You're getting processed. And there's a difference. And that difference often determines whether you build a business or whether you are just playing business. Your audit trail isn't just paperwork. It's your business's credibility in documented form. Every decision you make about audit and assurance today determines whether investors see you as amateur hour or acquisition ready tomorrow. If you want more insights like this, the kind that can save you from million-dollar mistakes and set you up for serious wealth, subscribe to my Substack at theauthorityfigure.substack.com or visit davidwhiteconsulting.com. I share the lessons I learned the expensive way, so you can learn them the smart way. Remember, in business, the only thing worse than having problems is not knowing you have problems until it's too late to fix them. Because in business, what you can't prove usually proves you can't be trusted.